everyone, this is Joshua G from Pixelate and I'm here to talk to you about tables. Now, before we begin, please do make sure to click that subscribe button down below to get notified of our latest updates as well as when tutorial videos gets uploaded. Now, if at any point in time you see this video is useful for you, please don't hesitate to leave a like down below. In our previous video, what we were left with was a dial. So in a dialog, what we do is we simply click a button and then the dialog appears, right? So first off, how do you implement a table? So a table is basically a component that allows you to display data in a tabular manner. Now, in other terms, it's generally called a turntable. It has the following main features out of the box. So it has filtering, it has sorting, it has single or multiple rows, selection with custom selection actions. It also supports pagination, grid mode, as well as total customization of rows and cells through scope slots. It also has the ability to add additional rows at top or at the bottom of your data rows. It has a column picker through a specific element or rather a component. It can create a custom top and or bottom table controls. And lastly, it has a responsive design. So with all of these features packed out of the box in the component, so how do you use this in the most basic way possible? So in order to implement this in the most basic way possible, what we're going to first do is we're going to define the columns. Now, you might ask, why do we need to do that? It's because the Quasar table relies on these column declarations in order to know what kind of a table it is going to build using its component. So first, what we're going to do is we're going to declare our columns. Now, how do we do that? So Quasar expects a column to be an array of objects, as you can see here in this demonstration here. So first off, it requires a unique ID in the form of a name. Next, what it's going to need is it's going to require a label for the header, which is this one. And then lastly, it's going to require a field, which is the raw object property to determine the value for the column. So with these three values, you already can create your own table. So in order to put that into a demonstration, what we're going to do first is we're going to create our own basic QTable. So we simply grab this one here and then we attach it to our code right here, like so. Next, since we declared a rows and we declared a columns, we need to create our own as well. So first, let's start with the columns. So for the columns, what we need is a array of objects. Now, first we need to declare a name. Let's declare it as a name, and then let's attach a label, which is the let's say complete name or first name, let's say, and then the field would be name. So now that we have a column defined, what we need now is a rows. So rows is an array of objects as well. So we said here that our field name is name. So we simply grab this one and then we attach a string value to it. Let's say Joshua, my name. And then once you hit save, and then you'll see that you have a table now here, right? So here's my name and this is the table name. If you want to add more columns, what you need to simply do is you create another object. So first we're going to set a name. Let's say this is first name, and then let's set this one to last name. And then we're going to set this as the first name, like so. And then we're going to rename this as first name in order to bind everything nicely. Next, we're going to create a label for this secondary column, which is a last name. And then we're going to set a specific field for this one. So let's say last name, like so. And then next, we're going to add a value here. So we're going to have a last name, and then let's say my last name. So as you can see, now we have two columns. So that is how you create your QTable in a nutshell. So that's the most basic definition of a QTable. Now, since we have this one already, as you can see also, the table has its own title. So we can rename that by simply changing the value of the title in the QTable like so. So let's say people. And now, there you go. So in order to make things nicely, what we're going to do is we're going to separate them with a div to make things more arranged, like this one. Then we're going to set it with another div. So we grab this one and then we place it inside, format it a little. The same with this one as well for alignment. So then you'll see that it's now neatly arranged. So we simply remove, rather let's remove the component already. That's much better. Now, with that said, by default, Quasar also has a dark mode. So in order to implement that dark mode, you simply attach a dark property here. And you'll see that it turns into dark mode. So that's one of the capabilities of Quasar out of the box. So aside from that, you can also compress the table into a dense format. Once we do that, what's going to happen is your table is going to compress into small, dense space rather. Hence the dense name. So that's basically what it does. So aside from that, it says here as well that you can omit specifying the columns. QTable will infer the columns from the properties of the first row of the data. Note that labels are uppercased and sorting is enabled. So as you can see here in this example, they simply attach the rows to it and then they set a row key. You will see that there are no column declarations. And then lastly, you have the rows right here. So you may ask, Quasar can do that? Yes. So as you can see clearly here, Quasar built its own table based on the value of the objects here. But you will notice as well that it doesn't have that much capable. Rather, it has its own capabilities as well. So you can quickly create your own tables. You can scaffold them in this way, or you can customize them to your needs using a column array, as you can see in our code right here. It gives your table a more defined content, right? So you will notice also in this example that they have a sticky header and a column. But there's a caveat with this one. This feature is apparently not supported on all browsers. So if you want to use it, you may consult with the specific website here to check if your browser is capable of this functionality. So you can clearly see that it has a sticky header and a sticky column. So for the separators as well, you can specify your own separators for this one. So in order to implement that, let's see, find separator here. You will see that content. So it has a parameter called separator, right? So it accepts the following values. So if we set that one as well to our table, what we're going to do is we simply attach a separator. And then we attach the following string, let's say vertical. If we say vertical, what's going to happen is it has a separator in the vertical axis, like so, right? So if we set this one to horizontal, what's going to happen is it's going to divide it in the horizontal manner, like this, or we can set it to cell. So if we do that, each cell contains a separator like this one, right? So lastly, we can set it to none. If we set it to none, you can see that there is no separator. So that's one of the features of the Quasar table. It can also support custom styling. So as you can see, it has a custom column here, which is based on our definition with this one. It also has its own custom coloring, which is based on CSS, like this one. So in order to implement a CSS, you simply add a color, let's say green. If you add that one, what's going to happen is, let's remove the dark for now. If you say green, okay, so let's use the card class instead. Card class, then let's say BG green, like so, you have a green table. And then you can also set the specific class to the table itself. So let's say text. So as you can see, the text of the table itself becomes red. So with this example, you can see that your table is very customizable in terms of CSS. Because what we're doing here is we're simply appending classes to specific elements of the table itself. So removing this all, let's go back to normal. So as you can see, there is no header footer for this example as well. So you might notice that table works for those with few values, right? So what if your table has a lot of values? So that's where virtual scrolling comes in handy, because what virtual scrolling does is it renders your content in a way that it doesn't affect performance. So as you can clearly see, we have so many values here, so many in fact that it counts up to 10,000 rows. So if you might be asking if Quasar is performant enough to do so, well, here is your answer. You can load 10,000 rows as an example. So moving on, you also have a selection. So you can select values in your table. So as you can see, if we select one row here, we get the value of the selected row. So before that, what we must do is we need to implement a row key. Now, what is this row key? In our code, you will see this row key as well here. Now, this row key is what binds our rows in Quasar to its own unique values. So if we add another value here, let's say John, and then Doe, like that, we have now two values here. But we declared that our row key is name, right? So that means it's name. So which means this one, yes, like so. So what it means is it expects that your name here in the object is unique. So for our case, in order to implement that, what we need to do is we need to use the first name as a key. Now, in our table, Quasar expects that the first name is unique, right? So because that's what the row key implements. So if you're going back here, as you can see, we'll append the row key. So as you can see, it defines the row key as a property of each row that defines the unique key of each row. So that's all for now. As you can see, it simply says that it is unique per se. So in a sense, in a default setup or in typical situations, array of objects usually contains something unique in each object, right? Because how are we going to identify if there are no unique values, right? So that's what it does basically. So aside from those, you have visible columns, you have custom tab, and a full screen. So if you turn this on and off, you can switch on and off columns. So if that is your desired behavior, you can implement this as well. So you can select here the visible columns as well in the form of a drop-down. Another feature is we have a Popup Editing right here. So this is useful for those instances where you want to edit directly to the content, like this one. So if we set the ice cream sandwich, for example, into a higher value, like this one, that's what it does. So in this case, it's not yet binded. So in a UI perspective, you may use this example in case if you want to implement such features, such as if you want to edit right here, let's say 8. So as you can see, it's not changing because it's not bound to a model, right? Because it is declared as a constant, as you can see here. So it's constant, so it cannot be changed. And it's not a V model as well. So for the grid style, you can also specify your own type of grid. So in this one, you can see that it's set here in a grid style. So it has boxes. Also in this one, it's set a grid with headers example. So you have a grid here as well as a header above here. So in this example as well, it set a colored grid style. So for each grid content, it has its own color, which is blue. So here is another example of a masonry-like grid. So if you take a look at this example, it's not anymore looking like a table, right? But it still is a Quasar table. So for this example, you have a grid style with slot. So as you can see, they implemented here a slots in a sense that they used the template with the V slot for both top right and the item itself. So you can also use V slots for your QTables in case you want to customize the content of your tables in the most imaginative ways possible, as you can see clearly in this example. So also Quasar supports expanding rows. So if you click this one, the row itself expands, as you can clearly see. But in order to implement it, Quasar expects the table to have a unique distinct key on your QTR in order to implement that expanding rows, because this expanding row requires a unique key in order to expand it properly. So as you can see, it is also expandable out here. And then in this one, you have a virtual scroll example, testing it out with 10,000 rows. So in case you want to customize your table, you have before and after slots right here. So what it does is you simply create a table and then you append a V slot to it with the specific top row, and bottom. So in this example, you can see that they clearly customize their Quasar table right here. So these are the V slots they created. So you have top row, you have a bottom row here, and then bottom. Now, you may insert any content inside of these V slots, as you can see here in this example. In their case, they simply added a string to it. Next, it also supports pagination. So below, you can see that they have a pagination example right here. So it paginates basically. And then it also has a pagination slot in case you want to customize your pagination. So if you click here, you will see that they customized their pagination by adding a V slot. So this one. And then, they also added their own custom loading state. So in order to implement that, they simply created a template with a V slot of loading. So that way, you can customize the loading state itself. So in this case, what they created is an inner loading. And then, you can also have a custom top, which is this one. And then, you also have body slots. So for the custom top, you can create your own custom top template for your table using the V-slot feature. Or that is the same case as well for the body props. So as you can see, you have the V-slot body. So you can see that the table contents are clearly styled, as well as for this one. And for this example one here as well. But in this case, they simply added a style to the name itself. So for this column only. So for the header slots, they showed you some examples on how to customize the entire header row itself. So based on all these examples, you can clearly see that the table functionality of Quasar is very robust and very flexible. So it also supports the no data. So what does no data mean? No data simply means that it cannot find any content to put to the table. So if you have a no data, you can create this label right here. So if you insert this no data label here, for example, in our case, let's say like this one, if we remove our content from here temporarily, what's going to appear is it says it didn't find anything for us. So if you take a look, it separates our content when it has it separates our table if it has a content and then if it has no content. So if we return values back, it goes back to normal. So aside from that, you can also customize the no data slot in order to change its content, as you can clearly see here. So they customized the label. So aside from those, you can also handle the bottom layer with several features, as you can clearly see with these toggle states right here. So aside from those, you can also implement your custom sorting. In this case, like this one, they implemented their custom sorting. And then lastly, the table is responsive by itself. If you use a dense prop, you can see that it is responsive based on the screen of the user. So aside from that, it also serves server-side pagination, filter, and sorting if that is what you are aiming to build for. But in our case, it is not applicable because we are on single-page application. So aside from that, it can export data, but it has a certain functionality required from Quasar, which is the export file. So as you can clearly see, they created a function for exporting the table itself. So a bit of JavaScript, and then what you get is a CSV file, which is based on this name here. And then you have a text/CSV. So aside from that, you also have keyboard navigation right here. So you can use your keys in the keyboard to navigate the table. So it says here, you can use arrow up, arrow down to navigate the table. As you can see right here, I am navigating the table using my keyboard. So I press up and then I press down, up, down, down, down. So it works. So with all of these functionalities and custom features that it can support, as well as pagination on the fly, or rather pagination out of the box, you can also style it however you want. You can even customize it to look like something else aside from a table. And aside from those, you have so much functionality inside a single component. You can use tables on your advantage based on what you want it to do. You can either use it to create something unique, or you can use it to simply display content in a tabular manner, including all of the features listed right here. So with that said, again, if you see this video as good way to learn more about Quasar, we have upcoming videos and tutorials more in store for you. So please don't forget to click the subscribe button down below. Again, this is Joshua Haji. See you later, Pixelators.